I faced was that we're never going to get an alienating parent to admit to the fact that they're alienating. They won't identify that that's what they're doing.
Yeah, they would say whatever else, like they saving a child from abusive or bad parent, dangerous parent. That's what they're doing. Yeah, they would never admit that they're alienator.
So then we'd have to recruit them using a deceptive recruiting practice. That's ethically possible, but complicated.
Okay.
So you'd be recruiting alienating parents under a disguise that is ethical. So the disguise might be they thought they were protective parents and they lost their children in a family court case. And so you recruit them under a cover story, okay, because they wouldn't come out in public as an alienating parent. It doesn't matter whether
are people doing this, or are this just a thing that you should be doing? Or
I think we should be doing it. We should be finding a way to engage parents who use alienating behaviours somehow to find out,
to understand their tunnel of reality.
What happened. I'll give you an example. There's been a few cases I've worked in Australia again where they've been alienating mothers. Okay, their children have been put into the father's care. Okay, in both of those cases, these mothers had histories of child sexual abuse and family violence. Okay, and it was pretty apparent in both of those cases that these mothers had never really had the social or therapeutic support at the time when they were abused. So one of the mothers was sexually abused by a step-parent who went to jail for that abuse. She then went on and alienated her children based on false allegations very similar to what happened to her.
Right.
So you've got this is a trauma response. Okay?
And projection mechanism.
Okay, so it's replicating the trauma. Now, we could recruit a cohort of parents who have done that sort of thing without calling them alienating parents. Okay, the issue comes along when you wrap up the research and you anonymise it, and then you take what you've interviewed and you put it into a context that wasn't what you interviewed them for. Okay.
Right.
So then there's a whole lot of ethical issues we've got to address.
That's the only way to do that.
Yeah.
So what type of information would you try to get that with?
What you'd want to be finding out, you do a mirror image of this is I'm just speculating, right? You do a mirror image of a thematic interview that you might do with an alienating parent. Okay, so if I think about the research I did, or say research you're doing, and you explore what is the experience an alienated parent has. Okay, you just heard Ben Hines' research. What if you did an analogue of that or something similar with an alienating parent? Well, what was your experience like? Well, he was violent and abusive and I had to protect my children, and I know he sexually abused them or she was neglectful. You know, we'd hear all of the stuff that we probably know, but there may be a way, if you structure the interview correctly, to find out what's the pain that drives them.
Right. What is behind that?
What's behind it? And from a social perspective, where did they get the idea from that they could deal with that issue by removing the child from that parent? Where do they get their social validation from? Okay.
Why they decided it's the only way to protect?
Yeah.
Did they try any other ways?
That's right.
And what's stopping them of try to build the bridge with another parent.
That's right.
So basically to see the way they approach in that case, how they thinking, how they motivated, and to understand them better, right? To see the pattern on that behavior.
So what?
But
Another cohort we could try to find are alienating parents who have changed their behaviour, who have realised that what they're doing is harming the children. There's been some court intervention, they've seen therapists, whatever, and the children are spending time with both parents. They may not like their ex-partner, but they're not alienating anymore. Okay,
do you know many of them?
not many.
No.
I'd say it's a
Yeah.
very small cohort.
Right.
Yvonne would probably know more of them. Okay. One of the issues we've got is if we start taking the mental health approach and think of this through the personality disorder lens,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
That's another angle.
Where
Yeah. So how careful is it in investigating with this? I mean, I mean, there is this theories of narcissism, borderline, antisocial behavior. How well is that documented?
I think there is some research that associates personality disorders of the sort you've mentioned with alienating behaviours. Okay, I wouldn't say it's necessarily a really strong correlation. Like you couldn't say, well, if we can diagnose this person with BPD, therefore they're an alienating parent. It's just not that strong an association, because there's lots of people with borderline personality disorder who don't alienate.
and they're hard to diagnose sometimes.
They're hard to diagnose. And there's lots of people with narcissistic personality disorder who don't alienate. Okay? They do other things, that maybe not be one of them. So what is it that associates personality disorders with alienation? And I'm suspecting underneath that is trauma.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay?
Yeah.
So, because you're not born narcissistic, you're not born with borderline, it's a socially constructed experience. Something's happened to you. Okay? So I'm thinking about these alienating mothers. It's what I call cold compassion. I have some compassion for the fact that terrible things happened to them. There weren't the social resources or recognition to help them deal with what happened. Right? But my cold part is, well, you've had some choices to do things differently and you didn't. Okay? And here we are at the pointy end, dealing with what's happened to the children because you couldn't or wouldn't change your behaviour.
Yeah.
Okay?
And another thing that I'm strongly missing is also, I mean, to get the, not only to get the alienated parents, but to get the triads of both parents and the child in the same study, and look at how do they evaluate the same situation differently. And I mean,
Okay. I agree with you, that would be ideal. So I'm thinking about how we'd formulate research. There might be a research program with a couple of sub-projects that all inform it. Okay, so you might have to interview the triad individually rather than separately. There's 3 different research projects: the alienated parent, the alienating parent, and the children. Okay, because we have to approach them very differently, different models. So for example, if you had a research program around, what are your experiences of the family law system in helping you protect your children? That's a big sort of program question. So you're going to have 3 different versions of that if you talk to alienated parents, alienating parents, and alienated children. Okay? So, the alienated parent will say, well, they never listened to me about what was going on. I told them about all the behaviours, and we've heard some of that already today. Okay? The alienating parent might have their own version of that. Okay?
They will have, yeah.
They
for
definitely
sure.
will. Well, it doesn't. We just want to hear it, and the children will have their own experiences. Okay, so I don't know. That's just one way to do it.
Yeah, and as you said before, as we was talking before, is that for the court system, that for now learn to be binary, and that means that one is win and one is lose, and they fight to each other. So to change the perspective in a court, and instead of put it in a fight mode, just put it in a different realities. Like that's reality of one parent, and that's the tunnel of reality of another parent, and that's the children's reality. And judge can see in all that realities in order to decide which one, I don't know, is more healthier, or like how would you put it?
Well, they've got to decide which discourse and the reality that constructs it is best meeting the children's interests.
Interest, yeah, of course.
And the children's best interests discourse is a societal discourse. Okay, because if you think about what the legal system is, it's a social institution. It's supposed to represent social values, at least as far as the family is concerned. Okay, that's how I understand it. So yeah, that could be one way to deal with it.
And the concept of family is so changing right now.
Well, it's a network. It's not an institution anymore. It's a fluid network.
Yeah, exactly. And if you look at the Swedish experience, it's very interesting and phenomenal in a way, because there are so many different variation of families, as I know, that can be two fathers and one mother, or two mothers, three mothers. Like it's just so many.
But the same thing in Australia. We've got same-sex couples. In fact, one of my cases going to trial in before I leave Australia here is a gay couple, and one of the men has a child from his previous heterosexual relationship that was alienated from him because he came out as gay.
Right.
And that's not an unusual experience in the same-sex community. Okay, I've had another case of a lesbian couple where one mum was alienated, and they used a sperm donor, the same sperm donor, to have each one had bore the child, a child from the same sperm donor. Okay, but one mum was alienated from the children by the other mum because she didn't give birth to that child. Okay,
Right.
so there's this whole raft of different alienation experiences that are gender and sexuality based as well.
Exactly. And we need to take it in account,
Yep.
especially these times.
Yep. One of my early cases was a man who came out as transsexual, and he wanted to identify predominantly as a man, but wear women's clothing when he was at home.
Oh.
Okay, that did not go down well with mum and his adult children. So mum encouraged her adult son to beat his dad up because he was transsexual.
It's all about, it's all come to the point that human just mistaking love to something else, because it's not about love, and it's all about different concept of how would you replacing love with anger, or
Well,
try to prove your point instead of love. For example, if you look at the larger families, like people get divorced, right? So they have a children, and each of the partners now have a new partners. So what is the problem if a child would have two more adults who will love them? They will have more love, but because nobody look at this way.
Well, these are just speculations on my part, right? So in Western society, children are objects, they're possessions. And
not just children, I would say all humans, adults as
yeah,
well.
we're objectified as things.
Yes, exactly.
So what that means is we get to fight over them. And we also have this myth around unconditional love. Well, actually there are conditions on it. Okay. You know, I'll love you forever, but I can't handle a third dad. Or I can't handle the fact that, you know, dad wants to dress in women's clothing. Okay, all of a sudden there are conditions on it.
Yeah, it's not even fit in a box of my perception.
It doesn't fit in the neat, socially acceptable boxes.
Right.
Okay. And I think there's a bit of evolutionary psychology involved here, that we are both excited and repelled by difference. So if you think about the way attraction works, we're attracted to people who are similar to us, but also different.
Very different.
And the difference is exciting, and the similarity is safe, familiar.
Safe, yeah.
But what if it's too different? What's racism
The
about?
opposites are attracting to
That's
each
right.
other.
Yeah.
I mean, I think similarity is the best predictor of successful relationships, and opposite is actually not.
Yeah.
So
I'd probably agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think you had some good questions there about how to get alienating parents involved and their children. The triad. You know, that's a really good question.
It's definitely a missing part here.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
So many alienated parents and lacking of alienators itself.
Otherwise, I mean, there's so much discussion of like the child's best interest, and I mean, at least in Sweden, that's the holy grail of everything. But to me, it means nothing.
I agree.
Because it's an undefined concept that
Everybody
basically just is a
speculating.
matter of the evaluator's personal opinion.
Yeah.
And I don't. It's like a way of hiding behind something without taking responsibilities. And either we should have a very well documented idea of the child best, what the child best interest is, or we should just throw it away and say that children should have equal connection to. We should have like shared parenting, equal rights to both parents, and I'm more leaning to the latter than the former, but today I think people are hiding behind like this cloud.
Yeah. I think I agree with you, and I wrote an article about that in response to the UN Special Rapporteur's report on women and children, and we have another initiative in Australia about changing our family law system, and the child's best interest has been completely separated from the notion of the family being in the child's best interest, that somehow family relationships are actually beneficial to children. So what happens with the child best interest, it sits there as an undefined concept that somehow it's no longer connected to a family. The presumption that a family is the crucible for bringing up children no longer exists. Okay? So then what you've got is both parents effectively being on trial for their parenting. Okay? And then judges then make all sorts of frankly weird decisions, sometimes quite strange decisions about what they think is in the child's best interests. It doesn't always presume that having a relationship with both parents actually is in that best interest. Fundamentally, that the fundamental starting point is the family in which you were born or adopted, that's the developmental crucible that should be maintained. It goes to what you're saying. It's a ill-defined concept.
Mm-hmm.
It only has meaning if it's connected to something, like a family. And what's the social conception of how we bring up children?
So the judge should actually make a decision that the parents should come back together because it's the child's best interest. I mean, if you want to push the child's best interest, as the fundamental principle, that would be the choice.
So then we get back to the concept of no-fault divorce.
Oh yeah, I love that concept. That's my favorite.
No fault
divorce. Yeah.
So
not looking for the guilty one.
Yeah.
Guilty divorce.
So I don't know what the situation is in Sweden, but prior to 1975 in Australia, there was the old concept of you couldn't get divorced unless someone had done something wrong. So it meant either you were being extremely unreasonable or there'd been an extramarital affair. And yes, if there'd been violence, but it was very difficult for women to prove that.
Yeah, you need someone to blame.
Someone had to be doing something wrong because the primary function of family law then was to preserve marriage, preserve the family.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So then they brought in no-fault divorce, which means you could just
stop loving each other.
That's right.
Yeah.
So if you think about it, it means I've signed a business contract.
Yeah.
And now I don't want to do it anymore.
Yeah.
And that's it. And one person can unilaterally dissolve the marriage.
Right.
Okay? Now that...
And no fault, no guilt.
No. You don't have... The only thing you have to account for is what happens to the property and the children. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So then what? So now it's nobody's fault. No one's to blame. And the presumption is two parents can come together and work out what to do with their children after they're separated when they couldn't work it out while they were married.
Yeah.
All it's done is created enormous conflict.
Exactly, because it still takes a big social education and probably some sort of evolution for this social concept of divorce just being a life event, just like a marriage, and it's not need to looking for someone to blame. Do you think it's possible to have this society that will be just taking divorce as it went without a blame?
That it can divorce without blaming each other?
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, that happens. But
it's still, I think it's happened in some families, and probably in that families where two are grown-ups and they are not psychologically staying children.
What I think, this is just my speculation again, is that there's a theory or an aspirational idea that parents who are separating and divorcing need to change the nature of their relationship to focus on what works best for their children. Because although the marriage or the family might end, the relationship with the children does not end.
Yeah.
Okay? That's a great
Co-parenting.
aspirational goal.
Yeah.
But it's more honoured in the breach than anything else. So it's more often that parents can't do that than they can. The other thing, and I'm referring to Australia again, the vast majority of parents, families breaking up, negotiate some arrangements for their children that are acceptable to both parties. It's probably about 90-95% of cases. The 5% that go to family court are the most difficult of them all, and that even fewer of those go to a trial. So what we're talking about is the very few cases that cause 90% of the problems. is how I see it.
Yeah.
But those very few cases breed the next generation of people who then recreate the same problem as their parents. So it very quickly gets out of control. I don't know what the situation is in
other
Sweden,
countries,
but I'm going to guess that most people work it out.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, and I think, I mean, the focus here is, of course, on the worst cases. And
Yeah.
So
I think that just the same way we get in the driver license, we should here, before talking of parental alienation, we should have talked about parental license some sort, and co-parenting. It's a practice that nobody teaching, so people get divorced, they don't know how to co-parent, how to do that, how still to be parent even with a conflict with your ex-partner and all that. And it should be some sort of education that will taking care of that niche, because it's not come naturally for everybody. We need to teach people to do those things, and it will prevent parental alienation. We should think of prevention as well.
Yeah, I totally agree in the severe cases that they should do this mandatory in education.
Yeah.
But has this been tried somewhere? Or?
I don't know.
What
Parental school or something?
There's a couple of people that I know in Australia. We're talking about getting into schools with educational programs about what we would call respectful relationships, because the process of alienation is a learnt behaviour. Kids do it at school. I'm not talking to him because he smells, right? She's no longer in our friendship group because she's...
You mean alienated each other?
They do. They don't call it alienation, but it's the excluding
the group.
Someone from a group.
Yeah.
On the basis of characteristics that actually don't mean anything.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
territorial practices.
Yeah, boys bully each other out because
someone's different
or weak, perceived to be weak.
Right. Someone needs to be targeted.
Someone needs to be targeted
to address your anger.
That's right.
And justify some hate that you have.
And girls have their own way of bullying and use very clever relational exclusion methods.
Right.
You know, all of a sudden no one's talking to you on social media. Okay. Or they come across social media texts that say, don't talk to her, she's not right. Or, how could she have done that, said that? Didn't she say something about so-and-so? Or, look at how she does her hair or the clothes she wears. They start denigrating it. Okay?
Yeah.
So you can get into schools with educational programs, and Amy J. Baker had one. I don't want to choose.
Yeah, it would be a good experience that might be applicable for this parental circle.
And it's much easier to separate and divorce than it is to get married or to join up. Anyone can get married now, but you can get married and be together in what we call a de facto relationship. There's not a lot of education about how relationships work or the commitment to do the best for the children. Okay, and as you say, when they divorce, well, where's the support for them to learn how to co-parent with someone you may not like, but the children love?
Yeah, where is respect goes. Yeah.
Another reflection on something that made me think more clearly today was that somebody said that after divorce, it's fathers are 11 times more likely to take self-suicide than mothers, and I mean, of course, I know about that before. That's worse for fathers or for men to divorce than women. But anyway, it made it more clear. But this in combination with the fact that what does the man do? He either kill himself or work himself to death or something like that. Whereas what does the mother do? Well, she talks about the problem.
Sometimes.
Well, that they go to therapists, they talk to people, and what purpose does that have? The purpose, well, of course, who do you feel pity for? Who do you want to support? The guy that's he's sitting working there, or he's dead. Or should I? And then we have this mother that is complaining about everything. Of course, you support. It's the mother that has the problem here, because I can't really care about the dead person. I can't care about the person that's just working all the time.
The problem who speak about his the person who speak about his problem is the person who has a problem, right? The person who doesn't speak about the problem, there is no problem. Nobody knows that it has a problem.
That's my point.
Yeah, I see.
That's exactly my point. That there's this. It's the iceberg phenomena. Men have the big problems. They're the under the water of the iceberg. But we see the top of the iceberg. Women's small problems are emphasized.
But you now put it in a little like a stereotypical way, because I know the vice versa. I know men who's talking much more than women as well. So it's not gender thing.
I think
it's a personal thing. Yeah, some guys like to talk, some guys don't like to talk, and same to women. But I got what you're saying.
I don't know if that's the issue so much as social stereotypes.
Yeah, it is.
So
some sort.
There is a social stereotype collapsed on men that we don't talk about our issues. Okay. As a general rule, and women do talk amongst themselves, and it's in that talking, that they tend to resolve issues. That's what men complain about. You just want to talk about the problem, and they get into trouble when men propose a solution. Because women just want to ventilate. And in the ventilation of that, they actually solve the problem. Okay, that's just a
different approaches.
Yeah. But I don't think that's the issue. I wonder if that's the issue though. The person who controls the narrative is the one who's left alive. So the men who commit suicide and die, they're out of the picture. So there's only one story survives. Okay?
Right.
And the men who are silenced or don't feel they have a voice, then all there is for them is the despair of having failed at manhood. They failed as a father.
Right.
So, and I think, and that's when men go off and kill themselves and don't talk to anyone, because the shame is so profound they can't talk about it.
Yeah, it could be. It could be many
Well, shame's
reasons.
a big thing for men.
Yeah.
And they don't talk about it because they feel shamed amongst other men.
Right. Let's go and check that guys who is presenting their murder case.